a broken crystal glass reveals cracks deeper than any object of value. Humiliated before everyone, the young Nanny is surprised by the courage of a child who silences the elite. From that gesture, an invisible battle turns affection into threat and truth into a weapon. But it is in the heart of the house, not the dining room, that it is decided who truly belongs to the family. The Albright mansion on Embassy Row, an upscale district in Washington, D.C., glowed that Friday night. Mrs. Eleanor, the family matriarch, had organized a dinner to celebrate her 65th birthday. The impeccable table displayed Portuguese silverware inherited through generations and Czech crystal glasses that only appeared on special occasions. In the kitchen, Louisa Stone adjusted her unruly brown curls under a clip as she checked if Peter, the 7-year-old boy she had been caring for almost 2 years, was presentable for dinner. At 23, Louisa had gotten the job at the Albright household right after completing her pedagogy course. The young woman, born on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina, had come to Washington, D.C. in search of opportunities and ended up finding her greatest connection in the big city in Peter. "Aunt Louisa, do I really have to wear this tie?" "It's too tight," Peter complained, tugging at the fabric around his neck. "Just for tonight, little Peter. Your grandmother insists. And remember, tonight I'm not Aunt, I'm Miss Louisa, as your grandmother prefers when there are guests." She adjusted the knot gently. "But later, when everyone's gone, we can read that astronaut story you like so much." Peter's face lit up. "Promise?" "I promise. Now let's go, your father must be waiting." Henry Albright waited in the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of his white shirt. At 38, the civil engineer and construction entrepreneur still bore the marks of grief on his face. It had been 3 years since Mary Ann, his wife, passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him with a 4-year-old boy and a company to manage. "Are you ready?" Henry asked, looking at his watch. "My mother is already impatient." "Yes, sir. Peter is a true gentleman." Louisa adjusted the boy's tie one last time. Henry observed the caregiver for a moment longer than necessary. There was something in Louisa's determined simplicity that had intrigued him from the first day. Hiring her had been the best decision he had made since Mary Ann's passing. Peter, who had withdrawn into a world of silence and nightmares, had become a vibrant child again under the young woman's care. "You're coming with us, aren't you, Louisa?" Peter grabbed the nanny's hand. "Your grandmother asked me to help serve tonight along with Mrs. Jasmine," Louisa explained, referring to the household cook. "But you always have dinner with us," Peter protested. "Tonight is different, son," Henry intervened. "We have important guests." "As far as I'm concerned, Louisa would always have dinner with us," the boy grumbled. In the living room, the guests were already settled. Businessmen, local politicians, and family members circulated among glasses of sparkling wine and comments about the real estate market. Mrs. Eleanor, impeccable in her navy blue silk ensemble, commanded the evening like a maestro. "Finally, Henry. We were waiting for the host." Mrs. Eleanor smiled, but her eyes held a subtle reprimand. "Peter, come give Grandma a kiss." "Happy birthday, Grandma." Peter obeyed without enthusiasm. The matriarch observed Louisa standing by the living room door. "Louisa, please help Jasmine serve the first course." "And remember what we discussed. Discretion." Louisa nodded politely and headed to the kitchen. During dinner, she and Jasmine circulated through the room serving the guests. Peter followed her with his eyes, visibly uncomfortable among so many adults. "Your boy has grown, Henry," commented Sylvia Morrison, an old family friend and widow of a senator. "It's time for him to have a more permanent maternal figure, don't you think?" Henry swallowed hard. "Peter is very well cared for, Sylvia." "Yes, but a nanny doesn't replace a mother. And you, a young and successful man." Enough time has passed. The woman placed her hand on his. Mrs. Eleanor observed the conversation with approval. For months she had been trying to bring her son and Sylvia closer, a woman of family, as she liked to emphasize. Louisa's increasingly constant presence in the family dynamic worried her, especially because of how Peter had grown attached to the young woman. The night unfolded without incident until dessert. Louisa was serving the milk pudding when Peter called her from across the table. Turning quickly, her elbow brushed against one of the crystal glasses, which fell to the floor with a resounding crash. Silence filled the room. All eyes converged on the young woman, who stood paralyzed before the shards scattered on the marble floor. "I'm sorry, I didn't—" "That set belonged to my great-grandmother," Mrs. Eleanor exclaimed, standing up. "It was 100 years old, part of our family heritage." "It was an accident, Grandma," Peter defended. "Silence, Peter. This is an adult matter." The matriarch fixed her gaze on Louisa. "What is your monthly salary, Louisa? Because this glass was worth more than several months of your work." Humiliation burned the young woman's face. Some guests exchanged amused glances, while others feigned embarrassment. "Simple people never know how to handle fine things," Sylvia commented, loud enough to be heard. "That's why I always say you need to hire the right way." "Don't talk about Aunt Louisa like that," Peter shouted, climbing onto his chair. "She didn't mean to." "And you're being mean." "Peter," Mrs. Eleanor reprimanded, but the damage was already done. The room plunged into awkwardness. Henry, who had been silently observing everything until then, stood up and approached Louisa. "Leave it, Louisa. They're just crystal shards." He knelt down and began to pick up the larger pieces. "No, sir, I'll take care of it." She knelt beside him. Their hands met over one of the shards. Louisa quickly withdrew her hand, but not before feeling a cut on her finger. A drop of blood fell onto the white marble. "You cut yourself." Henry took a linen napkin from his pocket and wrapped it around her finger. The gesture, too intimate for the occasion, did not go unnoticed. "Henry, let Jasmine clean this." Mrs. Eleanor intervened, her face tense. "Louisa clearly doesn't know her place in this house." "Mother," Henry began but was interrupted. "Louisa will clean this herself, as she should. And that we need to have a conversation about appropriate behavior," the matriarch decreed, addressing the guests. "Let's move to the living room, please. Jasmine will serve the liqueur." As the guests withdrew, Louisa remained kneeling, picking up the shards. Peter tried to stay but was led away by his father. The boy cast a distressed look at the nanny. Alone in the room, Louisa felt the tears she had held back begin to stream. Through the half-open kitchen door, she heard Mrs. Eleanor's voice talking to Jasmine. "We need to find someone older, more experienced, and less attractive. This girl no longer knows her place, and I've seen how Henry looks at her." At that moment, among the crystal shards scattered on the floor, Louisa realized that something deeper had broken that night. The morning after the disastrous birthday dinner, the Albright mansion dawned with a heavy atmosphere. Louisa woke up early, as always, but hesitated before leaving her room on the upper floor of the service wing. Her face still felt hot, remembering the public humiliation of the previous night. She looked at her finger wrapped in the makeshift bandage she had fashioned. Henry's handkerchief, stained with blood, was folded on the dresser. She needed to return it washed, although something within her hesitated to part with that small symbol of kindness. She took a deep breath and decided to face the day. Her main concern was Peter. The boy had witnessed everything and would certainly be confused. She needed to reassure him, show him she was okay. Descending to the kitchen, she found Mrs. Jasmine preparing breakfast. The middle-aged cook, who normally greeted her with a warm smile, today merely nodded briefly. "Good morning, Mrs. Jasmine. Can I help with breakfast?" "No need. You'd better go take care of the boy." The dry response surprised Louisa. "Mrs. Eleanor wants to speak with you later." "She's in the office." Louisa's stomach tightened. The matriarch rarely summoned her formally. As she prepared Peter's breakfast tray, as she did every day, Mr. James, the family driver, entered the kitchen. "Good morning, young lady," he greeted, but without his usual smile. "Mrs. Eleanor has already called 5 people this morning. Looks like the phone will be ringing all day." Louisa nodded, not knowing what to say. She went upstairs with the tray, knocked softly on Peter's bedroom door and entered. The boy was still in bed, but woke up as soon as he saw her. "Aunt Louisa!" He jumped out of bed and hugged her around the waist. "Are you okay? Grandma was very mean to you yesterday." Louisa put down the tray and knelt to be at the boy's height. "I'm fine, little Peter. It was just an accident. It happens, but they were mean. And that lady in the green dress said ugly things. Sometimes adults say things without thinking when they're upset." She straightened the boy's messy hair. "Now let's have breakfast. We have math class today, remember?" While Peter ate, Louisa arranged his school uniform and organized his materials. She was so focused on the task that she didn't notice Henry's presence at the door. "Good morning." His deep voice made her turn, startled. "How's your finger?" "It's fine, sir. It was just a small cut." She showed the makeshift bandage. "Dad, Grandma was mean to Aunt Louisa," Peter said with his mouth full of bread. "Peter, don't talk with your mouth full," Louisa gently reprimanded him. "And don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Can we talk after Peter goes to school?" Henry asked, his face serious. "Of course, sir. Mrs. Eleanor also asked to see me," Louisa replied, trying to keep her voice firm. "My mother spoke with you?" Henry's face showed concern. "Not yet. Mrs. Jasmine said she wants to see me in the office." Henry frowned. "We'll sort this out. Don't worry." But Louisa was very worried. When she finished preparing Peter, she went down with him to meet Mr. James, who would take the boy to his private school in Georgetown. Before leaving, Peter hugged her tightly and whispered, "Don't let Grandma be mean to you." Her heart ached. In less than 2 years, she had grown so attached to that boy that the idea of leaving him was painful. But she was beginning to fear she would have no choice. Upon returning, she headed to Mrs. Eleanor's office on the ground floor of the mansion. The door was ajar and she heard voices. The matriarch was not alone. "She's too young and too pretty for this position." The voice was Roger's, Henry's brother-in-law and Peter's uncle. "I've always said that. Henry has been vulnerable since Mary Ann left, and this girl is clever. She's winning over the boy to get to the father." "Exactly what I think." Mrs. Eleanor's voice sounded firm. "Yesterday she practically seduced Henry in front of everyone, knocking over that glass and letting herself get cut. Did you see how he rushed to help her? We need to replace her with someone more suitable. I have a cousin in Miami who worked for years as a governess, a respectable lady with experience in good homes. No risk of complications." Louisa felt her blood run cold. So that was it. The broken glass had been just a pretext. The real problem was herself. Too young, too pretty, too close to Peter, and therefore a threat to the matriarch's plans for her widowed son. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the door. The conversation stopped immediately. "Come in." Mrs. Eleanor's voice sounded dry. Louisa entered, maintaining an upright posture despite her trembling legs. Roger was sitting in a leather armchair, a cup of coffee in his hands. His gaze assessed Louisa from head to toe, increasing her discomfort. "Good morning. Mrs. Eleanor, Mr. Roger," she greeted formally. "Louisa, we need to establish some rules." The matriarch was direct. "Yesterday's incident was unacceptable. A priceless item was lost due to your carelessness. I apologize, ma'am. It was an accident." "Accidents reveal unpreparedness," Mrs. Eleanor interrupted her. "This is not the first time we've noticed inadequacies in your behavior. The excessive closeness with Peter, the way you sit at family meals, the way you dress." Louisa instinctively looked at her simple uniform, black dress pants and a white blouse, with no cleavage or adornment. "From today on, you will no longer have meals at the table with the family. Your function is to care for Peter, not to participate in family life. Staff eat in the kitchen as it should be. But Peter is used to my presence at meals. He'll find it strange. Peter needs to understand the difference between family and staff," Roger intervened. "You're confusing the boy, making him believe he's part of the family." "I never intended that, sir. I just want what's best for him. What's best for him is clear boundaries." Mrs. Eleanor stood up. "And there's another matter. Your attitude with Henry yesterday was completely inappropriate." Louisa felt her face burn. "I don't understand, ma'am. I'm not foolish, girl. I see how you look at my son, how you try to involve him. Henry is vulnerable and confused since he became a widower. I will not allow you to take advantage of that." The injustice of the accusation hit Louisa like a slap. She had never insinuated herself with Henry. She deeply respected Mary Ann's memory and her role as an employee. "Mrs. Eleanor, I deeply respect Mr. Henry and this family. I would never—" "Enough. The rules are established. From today on, you will limit yourself to caring for Peter's education. You will no longer participate in family meals. You will not wear inappropriate clothes. And above all, you will maintain an appropriate distance from my son." Louisa took a deep breath, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "Yes, ma'am. You may leave. And remember, everyone in this house is now watching. Any slip will be your last." As she left the office, Louisa found Henry in the hallway. By the expression on his face, he seemed to have heard part of the conversation. "Louisa, excuse me, sir." She lowered her head and quickly walked past him, heading for the stairs. The following hours passed in a blur. Louisa organized Peter's study materials, prepared activities for the afternoon, but her mind was in turmoil. At lunchtime, when she would normally sit at the table with Peter and Henry, she remained in the kitchen, eating in silence under the curious glances of Mrs. Jasmine and Mr. James. "This house has rules." "Girl," Mrs. Jasmine finally broke the silence, "it's always been like this in respectable families. Everyone in their place." "I understand," Louisa replied, although she didn't. She had never experienced such explicit segregation, even coming from a humble background. When Peter returned from school, he ran to meet her in the study room. His little face lit up when he saw her, and Louisa felt a pang in her heart. The boy didn't know about the new rules. "Aunt Louisa, the teacher loved my drawing. Look, I made one for you too." She smiled, bending down to receive the paper. It was a colorful drawing of 3 figures holding hands. "Me, Daddy, hand Aunt Louisa" was written in childish letters. "It's beautiful. Little Peter, I'll keep it carefully. Aunt Louisa, Grandma said you won't have dinner with us anymore. Why, did you do something wrong?" The innocent question made her stomach sink. "No, dear. It's just that my place is here, taking care of you, and at mealtimes you should be with your family." "But you're like family," Peter protested. "Daddy always says you're like Peter." Mrs. Eleanor's voice sounded from the door. "Your piano lesson starts in 5 minutes. Go get ready." The boy looked from his grandmother to Louisa, confused by the palpable tension between them. "But Aunt Louisa and I were going to study." "Now, Peter," the voice brooked no argument. "And Louisa, remember what we talked about. Your role is educational, not maternal. It confuses the child." As Peter left, head bowed, Mrs. Eleanor gave Louisa one last warning look. The silent war had only just begun, and Louisa now realized she was alone in enemy territory. For the first time since she arrived in that house, she felt truly like a stranger, an intruder to be eliminated. At the dinner table that night, her place remained empty. From the kitchen, she could hear Peter's voice asking for her, and Mrs. Eleanor's answer, "Nannies are not family, dear. They always leave sooner or later. It's better for you to get used to it now." The following weeks in the Albright mansion became a daily exercise in resistance for Louisa. The young woman tried to maintain normalcy in her activities with Peter, but the changes were impossible to ignore. In the hallways, the other household staff now avoided long conversations with her. Mrs. Jasmine, previously friendly, became formally distant. Mr. James no longer shared small stories from his trips as a driver. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected around her. Peter, sensitive as ever, noticed everything. On the 3rd morning after the glass incident, Louisa found him crying softly in his room. "What's wrong, little Peter?" She knelt beside the bed, concerned. "Are you going to leave like the other aunt?" he asked between sobs. "What other aunt?" "Aunt Carmen." "And before her, Aunt Renee." Peter wiped away his tears with the back of his hand. "Grandma said all nannies leave." "That they never stay." "That they're not real family." Louisa's heart tightened. She immediately understood Mrs. Eleanor's game, to plant the seed of fear of abandonment in Peter, as a way to weaken the bond between them. "Look at me, Peter." She held his little hands. "I'm here and I have no plans to leave. You are very important to me. Promise." "I promise. Now let's get ready. We have science class today and we're going to learn about the stars, remember?" The smile timidly returned to the boy's face, but Louisa knew the doubt had been planted. A feeling of anger grew within her. Using a child's fear of abandonment as a weapon was cruel. But she couldn't confront Mrs. Eleanor directly without risking her job. That same afternoon, while helping Peter with his homework in the study room, she noticed Henry standing at the door observing them. Since the incident, he seemed to avoid her, probably influenced by his mother's insinuations. However, there was something different in his gaze today, a mixture of guilt and concern. "Is Peter doing well with his lessons?" he asked, entering the room. "Very well, sir. He has a knack for numbers." Louisa maintained a professional tone. "Dad, look what I learned today." Peter proudly showed his notebook with the solved math exercises. Henry examined the notebook, praising his son. Then he turned to Louisa. "Can we talk for a moment?" "In private." She nodded, her heart racing. "Peter, how about getting ahead on the exercises on the next page while I talk to your father?" In the hallway, Henry seemed uncomfortable, running his hand through his dark hair as he did when he was nervous, a gesture Louisa knew well after 2 years of working in the house. "Louisa, I want to apologize for my mother's behavior. I know the new rules are excessive. You don't need to apologize, sir. I understand my place in this house." Henry's face hardened slightly. "It's not about that. You have been extraordinary with Peter. He has never been so well, so confident. Since Mary Ann passed, you are the only person who has truly managed to reach him. I care a lot about him. I know that. And that's what—" Henry hesitated. "I'm trying to talk to my mother, to make her understand that her concerns are unfounded. But she is adamant at the moment. I ask for your patience." Louisa wanted to ask what exactly Mrs. Eleanor's concerns were, but remained silent. Deep down she knew the matriarch feared that the simple, beautiful Nanny was eyeing her wealthy, widowed son. "I will do my best for Peter." "Sir, always." "I know," Henry smiled for the first time in days. "And that's why I need you here. Please don't let this situation discourage you." Before she could answer, they heard Mrs. Eleanor's voice coming from the foyer. "Henry, where are you?" Sylvia Morrison called confirming Saturday's dinner. Henry's face clouded again. "I have to go. But we'll continue this conversation." He quickly walked away, leaving Louisa with an ambiguous feeling. On one hand, Henry's support was comforting. On the other, the message was clear. He was not ready to openly confront his mother. Days turned into weeks, and Louisa's situation in the house became increasingly tense. Mrs. Eleanor had implemented her rules with relentless rigor, and now the nanny was treated as an almost invisible presence, useful only for specific tasks. The staff, sensing which way the wind was blowing, began to avoid her or worse, to test her. One morning, Louisa found her uniform dirty when it should have been clean and ironed. The next day, her schedule with Peter's activities had disappeared, only to be found hours later in the wrong drawer. Small incidents, subtle enough to seem accidental but too frequent to be a coincidence. Peter, however, continued to be her refuge. In the hours they spent together, studying or playing, Louisa managed to briefly forget the hostility that surrounded her. But even this refuge was beginning to show cracks. "Aunt Louisa, Grandma said you can't go to my school presentation," Peter commented one afternoon, while they practiced for the school recital. "What do you mean?" "I always go to your presentations. She said only family can go." "That tickets are limited." Peter seemed confused. "But I want you there. Let's see what your dad says, okay?" Louisa tried to smile despite the hurt. That night, however, brought a new problem. After putting Peter to bed, Louisa went downstairs to get a glass of water from the kitchen. Passing by the library, she heard voices, Mrs. Eleanor and Roger again. "The plan is working," the matriarch's voice sounded satisfied. "The girl is isolated. Their staff know she doesn't have my favor, and they act accordingly. And Henry? Still hesitant, but that's temporary. Sylvia has been a constant presence, and he's starting to realize he needs someone from our social class, not an opportunistic nanny." "And what do we do if she doesn't resign soon?" "Patience, Roger. I'm planting the seeds. Soon the environment will be so hostile that she herself will want to leave." "And if she doesn't leave?" Mrs. Eleanor's voice lowered, but Louisa could still hear. "I have other methods. I found out she sent money to her sick mother in Charleston. A staff member dedicated to the family wouldn't divide her loyalties like that." The floor seemed to give way beneath Louisa's feet. How did Mrs. Eleanor know about her mother? She felt violated, as if her last refuge, her personal life, had been invaded. She returned to her room without the water, her body trembling. For hours she lay awake, considering her options. Maybe she really should leave, find another job. But the idea of abandoning Peter was heartbreaking. The boy had already lost his mother. Would he now lose another maternal figure? The next morning, taking Peter to school, she noticed something was different. The boy was quiet, withdrawn. "Is everything all right, little Peter?" He kept his eyes fixed on his backpack. "Aunt Louisa, do you love me?" The question caught Louisa by surprise. "Of course I do. Why are you asking that?" "Grandma said nannies only pretend to like children. That it's their job, but it's not real love." The cruelty of the manipulation hit Louisa like a punch. Now Mrs. Eleanor was directly attacking the emotional bond between them. "Peter, look at me." She knelt in front of the boy at the school entrance. "There are many kinds of love in the world. The love of a father, a mother, grandparents. But there is also the love we build with the people we choose. I chose to take care of you, and it's not just because it's my job. It's because you are special to me." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really? Never doubt it." Peter hugged her tightly. Over the boy's shoulder, Louisa saw other mothers observing the scene, some with approving glances, others, clearly friends of Mrs. Eleanor, with expressions of disapproval. That afternoon, returning home, Louisa found Peter crying in his room. His face had a scratch on his cheek. "What happened?" She rushed to him, concerned. "I got into a fight at school." Peter sobbed. "A boy said a nanny isn't family, that you'll leave when you get a better job." Louisa's heart broke a little more. She sat on the bed, hugging the boy. "Has anyone ever told you why I came to work in this house?" she asked softly. Peter shook his head. "I could have chosen to work in a school, earn more, have free weekends. But when I met you, little Peter, so sad after your mother passed, I knew my place was here. Not for the money, not for the beautiful house, but for you. So you're not leaving?" "Not by my choice, never." That night, Louisa was called to Henry's office. She found him tense, clearly disturbed. Peter's teacher called. "He got into a fight today." "I know, sir. He told me." "Louisa, what's happening?" "Peter has never been aggressive. And now he's wetting the bed again, something that hasn't happened in over a year." Louisa hesitated. Should she tell him about Mrs. Eleanor's manipulations? About how the matriarch was planting seeds of fear and insecurity in her grandson? "Peter is confused, sir." She opted for a half-truth. "The changes in routine, the new rules? He feels something is wrong, but he doesn't understand what." Henry sighed, running his hands over his tired face. "My mother insists he needs to learn the difference between staff and family. That his attachment to you is inappropriate, but I see my son regressing, returning to old fears. Children need emotional stability, sir. Peter lost his mother very early. He clings to figures who give him security, and you are one of them." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "I tried to be a constant presence for him, perhaps—" Louisa took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Perhaps your mother is right. Perhaps I should look for another job." "No!" The vehemence in Henry's voice surprised them both. "No, Louisa. Peter needs you," and he paused as if measuring his words. "This house needs you. I need you." The look they exchanged contained something new, something beyond the employer-employee relationship. But before they could continue, the phone rang. Henry answered, and his face changed. "Yes, Mother." "No, just talking about Peter's lesson." "Yes, I'm coming." When he hung up, there was a new determination in his eyes. "This cannot go on, Louisa. I'm going to talk to my mother. Establish clear boundaries. Peter is my son, and I decide what's best for him." Louisa nodded, fearing that Henry's words, though sincere at that moment, would dissolve before the relentless force that was Mrs. Eleanor, and she was right. That night, lying in her bed, she heard the heated argument between mother and son through the thin walls of the old house. The voices alternated between shouts and furious whispers, but some phrases reached her ears clearly. "She's an opportunist." "Though so, Mum, you're obsessed, Mother. The boy is confused. He thinks she's part of the family. And what's wrong with that? The problem is she isn't. She's an employee, Henry, a simple girl from Charleston who sees in you an opportunity to improve her life." The silence that followed was more painful than the words. Louisa covered her ears with the pillow, but couldn't block out the sound of the door slamming and Henry's heavy footsteps moving away. She closed her eyes, exhausted. The silent war had escalated, and she was in the center of the battlefield. On one side, the fear of losing her job, and the boy she loved like a son. On the other, her wounded dignity and the certainty that Mrs. Eleanor would never accept her. Dawn arrived without bringing sleep. Louisa looked out the window, seeing the lights of Washington, D.C. shining in the distance. She thought of her sick mother in Charleston, the money she sent monthly, the dream of bringing her closer when she got better. She thought of Peter, sleeping a few rooms away, probably afraid she would disappear in the morning. It was then that she made her decision. She would not leave. She would not abandon Peter. She would not give Mrs. Eleanor that victory. She would fight, not with the matriarch's weapons, but with those she knew: patience, firmness, and genuine love. The sun was beginning to rise when she finally fell asleep, exhausted but resolute. The war was far from over, but Louisa Stone would not be easily defeated. For Peter, for her dignity, and though she still wouldn't admit it to herself, for Henry, she would stay and face whatever came. The next morning, the Albright mansion awoke in silence. Breakfast passed without Henry appearing, and Mrs. Eleanor maintained a tense expression as she leafed through the newspaper at the table. Peter ate without appetite, his eyes constantly seeking Louisa, who was serving coffee in the kitchen with Mrs. Jasmine. "Did you hear the argument last night?" Mrs. Jasmine asked in a low voice, surprising Louisa with their first real conversation in weeks. "I heard something," Louisa replied cautiously. The cook sighed, looking around to make sure they were alone. "I've worked for the Albrights for 20 years. I saw Henry grow up, marry. I saw Mrs. Mary Ann pass away." She made a brief sign of the cross. "And I've never seen the boss stand up to his mother like yesterday." Louisa didn't know how to respond. Any word could be used against her later. "I'm not your enemy, girl," Mrs. Jasmine continued, surprising her. "I'm just trying to survive in this house, like all of us. But what Mrs. Eleanor is doing to you, and to the boy, it's not right. Why are you telling me this now? Because I saw Peter wetting the bed again. I saw how he cries secretly. That boy has suffered enough losing his mother." The cook dried her hands on her apron. "And because I saw how Mr. Henry looks at you." Louisa blushed. "Mrs. Jasmine, it's not what Mrs. Eleanor thinks. I would never." "You don't need to explain to me." The older woman smiled softly. "Just be careful. Mrs. Eleanor doesn't give up easily once she gets something in her head." The conversation was interrupted by Peter's arrival in the kitchen. The boy ran to Louisa, hugging her around the waist. "Aunt Louisa, can I stay with you today? I don't want to go to piano class." "But you love piano, little Peter. Grandma said she's going to watch me play, and she gets angry when I make mistakes." Louisa exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Jasmine. The pressure on the boy was increasing on all fronts. "I'll talk to your father about it, okay? But now let's get ready for school." The morning proceeded normally, with Louisa helping Peter get ready and then taking him to the car, where Mr. James waited to drive him to school. Upon returning home, she found Henry leaving his office, apparently on his way to work. He looked tired, with pronounced dark circles under his eyes, but smiled when he saw her. "Louisa, can we talk for a moment?" She nodded, following him to the library. Henry closed the door behind them, running his hand through his hair, the nervous gesture she knew so well. "Last night," he began, then hesitated. "I don't know how much you heard, but I had a serious discussion with my mother. Peter is suffering from this situation, sir." Louisa chose to focus on the boy, not herself. "He doesn't want to go to piano class because your mother constantly criticizes him. And he's afraid I'm going to leave." Henry's face hardened. "That ends today." "What do you mean?" "I made a decision. The first truly firm decision since Mary Ann passed." He took a deep breath. "This is my house. Peter is my son. And I will not allow anyone, not even my mother, to interfere with his well-being." Louisa felt a wave of relief but also apprehension. "Mrs. Eleanor won't accept it easily." "I'm not asking her to accept it." Henry's voice had a new firmness. "I'm communicating how things will be from now on. You will resume eating with us at the table. You will participate in all of Peter's activities, including school and social events when necessary. And most importantly, you will no longer be treated as an intruder in this house. I don't want to cause problems between you and your mother. The problem isn't you." "Louisa?" Henry took a step forward, getting dangerously close. "The problem is that since Mary Ann passed, I've suppressed myself. I let my mother take control, take care of everything, decide everything. It was easier that way. But it's not fair to Peter, and it's not fair to you." The gaze they shared lasted longer than was appropriate. Louisa felt her heart race, aware that they were alone in the library with the door closed. If anyone entered at that moment, Mrs. Eleanor's suspicions would seem confirmed. "Thank you, sir." She took a step back, breaking the moment. "I just want to do my job well and help Peter." "I know." Henry smiled. a genuine smile that hadn't appeared on his face in a long time. "And that's why I need you here. I need you to be well, comfortable, respected." The library door opened suddenly and Mrs. Eleanor appeared, her face a mask of false surprise. "Ah, you're here. Sorry to interrupt the conversation." Her tone made it clear she didn't believe it was just a conversation. "Henry, you're already late for the office." "And Sylvia called, confirming lunch today." "I won't be having lunch with Sylvia today, Mother. I have an important meeting." Mrs. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "You confirmed yesterday." "And I'm unconfirming now," Henry replied calmly. "Please tell her I'll need to reschedule." The matriarch seemed about to retort, but restrained herself upon noticing her son's determined expression. Instead, she turned to Louisa. "Don't you have tasks to do, girl? The house doesn't run itself." "I was just receiving instructions from Mr. Henry about Peter's activities," Louisa replied politely, heading for the door. "Excuse me." As she left, she could hear the beginning of a new discussion, but this time Henry's voice sounded firmer, more decisive. Something had changed. For the first time in weeks, Louisa felt a spark of hope. The afternoon brought another surprise. While organizing Peter's school materials in the boys' room, Louisa heard a soft knock on the door. It was Mr. James, the driver. "The boss asked me to call you, Miss Louisa. Everyone is in the dining room. Has something happened?" The old driver gave a half smile. "Mr. Henry is putting things in order." Intrigued, Louisa went down to the dining room. To her surprise, she found all the staff gathered: Mrs. Jasmine, Mr. James, the two maids who handled the cleaning, the gardener. Henry stood at the head of the table, and Mrs. Eleanor sat on the other side, her face a mask of contained fury. "Louisa, please join us." Henry indicated an empty chair beside him. She obeyed, feeling everyone's eyes, especially Mrs. Eleanor's, burning into her. "I've gathered you all to clarify some changes," Henry began, his voice calm but authoritative. "In recent months, this house has ceased to be the welcoming home it always was. Rules were arbitrarily created, divisions were imposed without my consent, and the result is that my son is suffering." Mrs. Eleanor opened her mouth to protest, but Henry raised his hand, silencing her. "From today on, we return to the original arrangement. Louisa, as Peter's nanny and educator, will resume sharing all meals with us, as she has always done since she arrived. She will participate in all activities related to my son, including school and social events when necessary." A murmur ran through the room. Mrs. Jasmine hid a smile, while the maids exchanged surprised glances. "Furthermore, I want to make something very clear," Henry continued, looking directly at each employee. "Any attempt to isolate, harm, or hinder the work of anyone in this house will be considered a serious offense. We are a team here, an extended family if you prefer, and we will treat each other with respect." "Family?" Mrs. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice trembling with indignation. "You're confusing things, Henry. Employees are not family. People who live under the same roof, who share meals, who take care of each other, who care about everyone's well-being." "What would you call that, Mother?" Henry retorted serenely. The matriarch stood up, her face red. "This is ridiculous. You're being manipulated, don't you see? This," she pointed at Louisa. "This girl is emotionally seducing you, using Peter as a bridge. It's so obvious." A heavy silence fell over the room. Louisa felt her face burn with shame and indignation. The other staff lowered their eyes, embarrassed. "Enough, Mother!" Henry's voice was like steel. "You are disrespecting Louisa in front of everyone, with no real basis beyond your own insecurities." "Insecurities?" Mrs. Eleanor laughed, a humorless sound. "I see what's happening. Everyone sees. This isn't the first time a young, pretty employee has used a child to get to a rich, widowed boss." Louisa stood up, trembling. "With all due respect, Mrs. Eleanor, that is slander. I have been in this house for 2 years, dedicated exclusively to Peter's well-being. I have never insinuated myself with your son. I have never disrespected Mrs. Mary Ann's memory." Listen to her. So articulate, so convincing. Mrs. Eleanor turned to the other staff. "And you? Are you going to side with her now? After years of working for this family?" Mrs. Jasmine surprised everyone by speaking up. "Mrs. Eleanor, with all due respect, you are being unfair. Louisa has been a blessing to this house, especially to the boy." "I agree," Mr. James added, adjusting his cap between his calloused hands. Little Peter has only improved since she arrived. The unexpected support from her colleagues moved Louisa. For weeks she had felt completely isolated, and now she realized that not everyone had turned against her. Is this a conspiracy? Mrs. Eleanor seemed genuinely shocked. Did you turn everyone against me, Henry? No one is against you, Mother. Henry tried to calm the situation. We are all in favor of Peter, in favor of peace in this house. Peace. The matriarch laughed bitterly. Peace is having order, clear boundaries. What you are doing is opening the doors to what, Mother? Say it. Mrs. Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to control herself. To inappropriate feelings, to confusion, to opportunism. I think we've heard enough, Henry concluded firmly. The decisions have been made. Louisa will return to her original place in this house. And any challenge to that? He looked directly at his mother. Will be with me. The meeting ended and the staff dispersed, some casting encouraging glances at Louisa, others still cautious, fearing reprisals from Mrs. Eleanor. The matriarch was the last to leave, stopping briefly beside Louisa. This isn't over, she whispered. I know, my son. This sudden firmness won't last. And when he falters, I'll be here, waiting. Louisa met the older woman's gaze, refusing to be intimidated. I'm here for Peter, Mrs. Eleanor, only for Peter. We'll see. The matriarch smiled coldly before leaving. When they were alone, Henry leaned against the table, looking exhausted but relieved. I'm sorry about that, Louisa. You didn't deserve to go through that embarrassment. Thank you for defending me, sir, she said simply. It means a lot. Henry looked at her in a new way, as if truly seeing her for the first time. You're extraordinary, you know. Anyone else would have resigned weeks ago. I couldn't do that to Peter. Only to Peter, he asked, a half smile on his lips. Louisa felt her heart race. The ground they were treading on was becoming increasingly dangerous. I like this house, the people, my work. I understand. Henry nodded, respecting her boundaries. Peter will be back from school soon. Let's surprise him with the news that you'll be having dinner with us today. The boy's joy upon discovering that Louisa would once again share meals with the family was confirmation that Henry had made the right decision. Peter jumped with delight, hugging the nanny and then his father. So you're not leaving, Aunt Louisa? He asked, still insecure. No, little Peter, I'm not. During dinner, Mrs. Eleanor maintained an icy silence while Peter chatted animatedly, telling them about his day at school. For the first time in weeks, there was an atmosphere of normalcy in the dining room. Later, after putting Peter to bed, Louisa was returning to her room when she heard raised voices coming from the living room. Mrs. Eleanor had not given up easily, as predicted. She heard the matriarch on the phone, her voice tense. Roger, I need you to come here tomorrow night. Yes, it's urgent. Henry is completely blind. He practically elevated that girl to a member of the family. No, I won't accept this. Yes, I have a plan. We'll make her life so unbearable that she'll resign. Of course, Peter will suffer at first, but it's for his long-term good. No, Henry can't know. He thinks he's in control now, but we know the truth, don't we? Louisa moved away, her heart heavy. The first battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. Mrs. Eleanor was determined to drive her out of that house, and she would use every means at her disposal. In her room, she sat at the small desk and wrote a letter to her mother in Charleston. She didn't mention the problems at the Albright house. She didn't want to worry her during her recovery. Instead, she wrote about Peter, about the small daily victories, about how much she missed her. As she lay down, Louisa thought about the conversation she had overheard. Mrs. Eleanor and Roger were planning something for the next day. Should she tell Henry, or would that only escalate the conflict further? She decided to wait and observe. The matriarch wouldn't act openly now, not after Henry's firm stance. The danger would come subtly, stealthily, and Louisa needed to be prepared. In the next room, Peter slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. In the hallway, Henry passed on his way to his own room, stopping briefly before Louisa's door. For a moment he seemed about to knock to say something more. Then, shaking his head, he moved on. The Albright house finally fell silent. An apparent calm that, everyone knew, was just the preparation for the next storm. The following weeks in the Albright mansion brought an unstable peace. On the surface, life seemed to have returned to normal. Louisa shared meals with the family, actively participated in Peter's routine, and was treated with respect by the other staff. Mrs. Eleanor, however, maintained a silent hostility, observing everything with vigilant eyes. Her strategy had changed. Instead of direct attacks, she had opted for a war of attrition. It was 1 month before Peter's 8th birthday, and Louisa was already preparing, as in the previous year, a small celebration. The boy had requested an astronaut-themed party, his new passion after science lessons with the nanny. "Can we invite my school friends, Aunt Louisa?" Peter asked excitedly, as they glued fluorescent stars to his bedroom ceiling. "And make a rocket-shaped cake?" "Of course. Let's make the guest list and show it to your father." It was then that Mrs. Eleanor entered the room without knocking. Her face lit up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes when she saw her grandson. "Talking about your birthday, my dear. How wonderful. I have a surprise for you." She glanced briefly at Louisa before continuing. "Grandma will organize your party this year, a special celebration worthy of my only grandson." Peter's face contorted in confusion. "But Aunt Louisa is already planning my party." "Astronauts." "Astronauts?" Mrs. Eleanor laughed softly. "That's very simple, don't you think? I was thinking of something more elaborate. At the equestrian club, perhaps, with all your little school friends and the children of your father's colleagues." Louisa felt the blow. The matriarch was now using a new strategy, taking control of areas that previously belonged to her, such as Peter's celebrations and special moments. "Mrs. Eleanor, we've already started the preparations," Louisa tried to argue politely. "Peter is very excited about the astronaut theme." "I'm sure he is," the matriarch replied with false sweetness. "But I believe my grandson deserves something more substantial. Don't you agree, Peter? A big party with many gifts, a full buffet." Peter's eyes sparkled at the mention of gifts, although he still seemed torn. He looked at Louisa as if asking for permission. "Can we have astronauts at the big party, Grandma?" "We'll see what's possible, dear." Mrs. Eleanor stroked her grandson's hair. "Leave everything to me. You just need to worry about having fun." After the matriarch left, Peter seemed confused. "Aunt Louisa, are you angry?" Louisa swallowed her frustration, forcing a smile. "Of course not, little Peter. Your grandmother wants to do something special for you, and that's good. But I wanted you to throw my party. I'll help your grandmother, don't worry. The important thing is that it's a happy day for you." Later, Louisa found Henry in his office and told him about Mrs. Eleanor's intervention in the party plans. "I've heard about it," Henry sighed. "Mother approached me earlier today, saying she wanted to do something special for Peter. She said it would be a way to redeem herself, to get closer to him." "And you believed her?" The direct question surprised Henry. "Do you think there's another reason?" Louisa weighed her words. "I think your mother is trying to show that she can replace me in all aspects, including special moments with Peter." Henry reflected for a moment. "It's possible. But if that's the case, it won't work. Peter adores you." "That won't change because she organized a party. I'm worried about the type of event she's planning. Peter is a simple boy who gets anxious in very formal environments. He really wanted a small party with an astronaut theme." "I'll talk to her," Henry promised. "I'll ask her to keep the theme at least." But Mrs. Eleanor had other plans. In the following days, the mansion saw a parade of event organizers, decorators, and caterers. The simple astronaut party gradually transformed into an elaborate social event, with over 80 guests, most of them adults, friends of the Albright family. "It's just a small family gathering," Mrs. Eleanor insisted whenever Henry questioned the scale of the preparations. "Peter deserves this after everything he's been through." The matriarch was astute. By using her grandson's needs as justification, she made it difficult for Henry to object. And when he insisted on the astronaut theme, she vaguely agreed, but the preparations went in a completely different direction. A week before the party, Peter returned from school agitated. Mrs. Eleanor had sent elaborate invitations to all his classmates, describing a children's gala event at the equestrian club. "Aunt Louisa, everyone at school is talking about my party," Peter recounted, half excited, half anxious. "Lucy said she's going to wear a princess dress. And John said his dad is a member of the equestrian club, and it's very fancy there." "Sounds like it's going to be quite a party," Louisa commented, noticing the boy's increasing anxiety. "What if I don't like it? What if it's boring? Aunt Louisa will be there with me, won't she?" Of course, little Peter. I'll be by your side the whole time. But that promise would be difficult to keep. The next day, Mrs. Eleanor called Louisa to the office. About Peter's party, the matriarch began, flipping through a notebook. We need to define your role. I'll be with Peter. As always, Louisa replied naturally. No, Mrs. Eleanor smiled coldly. You don't understand. This is an important social event. The Albright family will be hosting distinguished guests. Your role will be behind the scenes, helping with the children in general, making sure everything runs smoothly in the children's area. But Peter expects me to be with him. He's anxious about all this formality. Peter will be with his family, with me, with his father, with Uncle Roger. It's time for him to understand that there are social occasions where the presence of staff is not appropriate in the intimate circle. Louisa felt indignation grow. I thought Mr. Henry had already made it clear that I would participate in all activities related to Peter. My son is not thinking clearly these days, Mrs. Eleanor replied dryly. But don't worry, I've already spoken with him. Henry understands the importance of maintaining appearances at social events. The office door opened, and Roger entered, smiling when he saw Louisa. Ah, discussing the party? Excellent. It's going to be a memorable event. The way he looked at Mrs. Eleanor contained a complicity that put Louisa on alert. Something more was being planned. Roger will bring some important business partners, Mrs. Eleanor explained, influential people in Washington, D.C. society. It's an opportunity for Henry to expand his contacts, perhaps even meet someone special. The insinuation did not go unnoticed. Louisa then understood that the party had multiple purposes: to distance her from Peter on a significant day, to reaffirm the Albrights' social standing, and possibly to introduce Henry to potential suitors from the same social circle. I understand, Louisa replied simply. May I leave now? Of course, dear. Mrs. Eleanor's falsely sweet tone did not disguise the satisfaction in her eyes. Oh, and please arrange for a more formal uniform for the day. Perhaps something black, discreet. Nothing flashy. That night Louisa sought Henry after dinner, finding him alone on the terrace. Your mother said she wants me behind the scenes during Peter's party. She was direct. That you agreed to it. Henry seemed genuinely surprised. What? I never agreed to that. Peter wants you by his side, and that's where you should be. She mentioned the importance of maintaining appearances, that there will be important guests. My mother has turned Peter's birthday into a social event. Henry shook his head, frustrated. But I will not allow her to use him for her power games, nor to separate him from you on such an important day. Thank you. Louisa felt immense relief. Perhaps there was hope that the party wouldn't be a complete disaster. In the following days, the mansion was taken over by final preparations. Exuberant flowers, elaborate arrangements, a team of waiters being instructed by Mrs. Eleanor. Of astronauts, only a few small references in the cake decoration, a minimal concession to Peter's original wish. On the eve of the party, Louisa helped Peter try on the new suit Mrs. Eleanor had ordered. The boy seemed uncomfortable in the formal attire. I don't like this suit, Aunt Louisa. It's tight around my neck. It's only for a few hours, little Peter. Then you can change. Grandma said there will be photographers, that it will be in the social pages. The boy seemed more worried than excited. She said I need to behave very well because these are important people. Remember, it's your day. Louisa adjusted his bow tie, loosening it. The important thing is for you to have fun. The big day arrived with a perfect blue sky, typical of Washington, D.C. in the drier months. The equestrian club was impeccably decorated for the occasion. Elegant tables were scattered across the lawn. A stage had been set up for the live band, and a special area for children featured inflatable toys and hired monitors. Louisa arrived early with Peter and Henry, while Mrs. Eleanor had already been on site since dawn, overseeing every detail. The matriarch wore a navy blue silk ensemble, elegant and intimidating. Seeing Louisa, who had opted for a simple but beautiful dress instead of the suggested discreet uniform, her eyes narrowed in disapproval. I thought we had agreed on something more. Appropriate for your role, she commented acidly. I am here as Peter's companion, Mrs. Eleanor, Louisa replied calmly. as his father determined. The matriarch shot an irritated glance at Henry, but was interrupted by the arrival of the first guests. Soon the space filled with elegantly dressed people, many of whom Peter barely knew. The boy clung to Louisa's hand, clearly uncomfortable with so much attention. "Smile for the photographers, dear," Mrs. Eleanor instructed, positioning herself strategically beside her grandson. "Let's show everyone how the Albright family celebrates in grand style." The party progressed, and it became increasingly clear that the birthday boy was merely a pretext for a larger social event. Peter's few school friends were gathered in a side area, while the center of attention was adult networking, fueled by champagne and comments on the financial market. Henry seemed as uncomfortable as his son, especially when Mrs. Eleanor insisted on introducing him to young single women from influential families. Sylvia Morrison, the senator's widow, circulated the event as an unofficial co-host, always close to Henry. After lunch and the cake, which was cut in an almost ceremonial manner, Mrs. Eleanor ascended the small stage set up for the band, asking for a moment of attention. Louisa was with Peter in the children's area, helping him open some presents, when she heard the announcement. "Dear friends, family, distinguished guests, today we celebrate not only the birthday of my precious grandson, but also a special moment for our family." The matriarch's voice sounded melodious through the microphone. "As you all know, my son Henry has faced difficult times in recent years. The loss of Mary Ann, may God rest her soul, left a void in our home." A murmur of sympathy ran through the audience. Henry seemed confused, clearly not expecting this speech. Louisa felt a shiver of apprehension. "But today I have an important announcement to make," Mrs. Eleanor continued, gesturing for Henry to approach the stage. "It is time for us to look to the future, and so I would like to draw everyone's attention to something that has been happening behind the scenes in our house." Louisa's heart raced. Mrs. Eleanor's tone, the triumphant look in her direction, all indicated that the planned moment had arrived. "Recently I discovered something disturbing." The matriarch paused dramatically. "Something that directly affects my grandson and my son. A situation that, as the matriarch of the Albright family, I cannot allow to continue." Henry finally went up to the stage, trying to interrupt his mother. "Mother, this is not the time or place." "It is exactly the time, Henry." Mrs. Eleanor briefly moved the microphone away, speaking softly to her son, before returning to the audience. "Friends, I need your attention for something serious. Peter's nanny, a young woman we hired 2 years ago, has abused our trust." A buzz of shock and disapproval came from several guests. Peter looked around confused, not fully understanding what was happening. "And there's more," Mrs. Eleanor continued, relentless. "Recently we discovered that she is pregnant with my son's child, whom she seduced in moments of weakness." The accusation dropped like a bomb. Louisa felt the blood drain from her face. It was a complete absurd lie, but spoken with such conviction that many guests seemed to believe it. "That's a lie," Henry finally managed to take the microphone. "Mother, have you lost your mind? How can you make such an accusation in public?" "I have proof, Henry." Mrs. Eleanor pulled something from her pocket, a small velvet box. She opened it, revealing a gold wedding band with small diamonds. "I found this in her room. Your grandmother's engagement ring, which was kept in the family locket. A piece she obviously stole, believing she could force a commitment." The guests gasped collectively. Louisa felt her legs weaken. She had never seen that ring, much less stolen it. She then realized the extent of Mrs. Eleanor's plan, an elaborate trap, meticulously planned, executed at the moment she would be most vulnerable, in public, surrounded by influential people who would never believe a nanny's word against the Albright matriarch. "That's not true," Louisa managed to say, her voice almost inaudible in the confusion that had set in. Peter beside her began to cry, frightened by the commotion and the accusations against his beloved nanny. "Aunt Louisa didn't steal anything," he shouted, but his child's voice was lost in the noise. Henry quickly descended from the stage, pushing through the crowd to where Louisa and Peter were. His face was livid with fury. "This ends now," he declared, scooping his son into one arm and firmly holding Louisa's wrist with his free hand. "We're leaving here." Not so fast. Roger blocked their path. Henry, be reasonable. This woman deceived you, manipulated your son, stole a family heirloom. She needs to face the consequences. The only one who will face consequences here is you and my mother. If you don't get out of my way right now. Henry's voice had a dangerous quality Louisa had never heard before. The crowd watched, divided between shock and morbid fascination with the family drama unfolding. Photographers hired for the event now fired flashes incessantly, ensuring the scandal would be documented in detail. It was then that a child's voice cut through the tense silence. "I'm the one who took the ring," Peter declared, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "I wanted to give it to Aunt Louisa as a present." A new murmur ran through the crowd. Mrs. Eleanor, who had come down from the stage, approached with an incredulous expression. "What are you saying, Peter? Why would you do that?" "Because Aunt Louisa is like a mother to me," the boy replied, tears streaming down his face. "I found the ring in your room, Grandma, when you showed me the family jewels. I thought it would be a beautiful present for her." Mrs. Eleanor's face paled. Her plan crumbled before a simple truth spoken by a child. "He's confused." She tried to regain control. "Obviously manipulated." "Enough, Mother," Henry interrupted her. "You've gone too far." At that moment, other unexpected allies emerged. Mrs. Jasmine stepped forward through the guests. "Excuse me, but I need to say something." The cook spoke, surprisingly firm. "I've worked in this house for 20 years. The accusation that Louisa is pregnant is absurd. We live together daily, and I can assure you there is no sign of pregnancy. No morning sickness, no physical changes, nothing." Mr. James, the driver, joined her. "I take the young lady and little Peter everywhere. There has never been any inappropriate behavior. No suspicious visits, no secret meetings." And then, surprising everyone, Peter's private school teacher stepped forward. "I know Louisa from school meetings and can attest to her exemplary professionalism. Peter has improved significantly under her care, both academically and emotionally." The tide was turning, and Mrs. Eleanor realized she had made a strategic mistake. She tried one last card. "That doesn't explain the ring in her room." "Yes, it does," Peter insisted, now more confident. "I hid it there weeks ago. I wanted to make a surprise for Mother's Day. Give the ring to Aunt Louisa because she takes care of me like a mother." The silence that followed was deafening. The simple, innocent truth of a child had unmasked the entire elaborate plot. Some guests began to discreetly move away, embarrassed to have witnessed the public exposure of an injustice. Mrs. Eleanor, realizing she had lost control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. "It's obvious the girl instructed Peter to say that. It's a trick. Enough." Henry's voice cut through the air like a whip. "This party is over. I appreciate everyone's presence, but I ask you to leave now." As the guests dispersed quickly, many avoiding looking directly at any family member, Henry turned to his mother. "You and I will have a serious conversation when we get home. What you did today crosses all boundaries." Leaving Mrs. Eleanor in shock, he gently took Louisa by the arm and, with Peter still in his arms, led them out of the venue. In the car, as Mr. James drove silently back to the mansion, Peter fell asleep, exhausted by the emotional drama. "I'm so sorry for all this. Louisa." Henry finally spoke, his voice low so as not to wake his son. "I never imagined my mother would go to such an extreme. I should have predicted it," Louisa replied, still trembling. "I knew she was planning something with Roger. It doesn't matter now. The important thing is that the truth came out thanks to Peter." Henry looked at his sleeping son. "He loves you very much, you know, so much that he was willing to face all those adults for you." "I love him too," Louisa replied simply, finally allowing herself to cry. Henry extended his hand, holding hers firmly. "I won't let anything like this happen again. I promise." The rest of the journey was made in silence, but their hands remained joined as if sealing a silent pact. The birthday party had transformed into something completely different from what was planned. Not a social celebration, but the moment when masks fell and the truth, however painful, finally came to light. The return to the Albright mansion after the disastrous birthday was marked by a heavy silence. Mr. James parked the car at the main entrance, where Henry got out carrying a sleeping Peter, followed by Louisa, still shaken by the events. Mrs. Eleanor and Roger came shortly after, in another vehicle, maintaining a strategic distance. "Please take Peter to his room," Henry asked Louisa, his voice calm but firm. "I'll be with him as soon as I resolve certain matters." Louisa nodded, taking the boy in her arms. As she went up the stairs, she heard Mrs. Eleanor's car arriving. She hurried, not wanting to witness the confrontation that would surely occur. In the room, she carefully laid Peter on the bed. The boy had slept the entire way, exhausted by the emotional turmoil. She took off his shoes and uncomfortable suit, covering him with the light duvet. She sat beside the bed, watching his serene little face. So different from the distressed expression during the party. "Thank you for defending me, my little hero," she whispered, brushing a lock of hair from the boy's forehead. From downstairs, raised voices began to escalate. The confrontation had begun. Louisa closed the bedroom door to muffle the sound, not wanting Peter to wake up and witness another family argument. It was past 10 at night when a soft knock sounded at the door. Louisa, who had been watching over Peter's sleep, got up to open it. Henry was there, his face marked by tiredness and tension, but his eyes had a new clarity. "How is he?" he asked in a low voice. "Sleeping deeply. He hasn't woken up once. Can we talk?" "And the office?" Henry seemed to hesitate. "Unless you prefer to rest. Today was difficult for everyone." "No, it's fine. I couldn't sleep now anyway." In the hallway, Louisa noticed the silence that dominated the house. "Your mother?" "She left," Henry replied dryly, "along with Roger. I asked them to spend the night out." The information surprised Louisa. She would never have imagined Henry expelling his own mother from the mansion, even temporarily. Something fundamental had changed. In the office, Henry poured himself a finger of whiskey before sitting in the armchair opposite Louisa. For a long moment, he just watched the amber liquid in the glass, as if searching for words. "First, I want to apologize," he finally began. "For the embarrassment, for the public humiliation, for everything you went through today, and in recent weeks. It wasn't your fault, but it was my omission." He took a sip of the drink. "For years since Mary Ann passed, I've allowed my mother to make decisions that should be mine. It was easier that way, you see, to let her take care of everything while I drowned in work and grief." Louisa nodded, understanding. She had observed this pattern since she arrived at the house. "And Peter paid the price," Henry continued. "A boy needing stability, and I was absent. Not physically, but emotionally. It was you who filled that void." "I just did my job, sir." "No," he interrupted her, placing the glass on the table. "You did much more than your job, Louisa. You brought life back to this house. You brought smiles to Peter. You brought—" he hesitated. "You brought light to a place that had been shrouded in shadows for a long time." The look they exchanged contained something new, something they had both avoided openly acknowledging. "What happened at the party today was unforgivable," Henry continued. "My mother crossed all boundaries. Using my son like that, manipulating guests, fabricating lies about you. How did she get the ring?" Louisa asked, still intrigued by that detail. "Apparently Peter really did take it. He confessed everything after you put him to bed. He woke up briefly and told me. He found the ring in my mother's room weeks ago and decided it would be a perfect gift for you." "And she found out?" "She probably noticed its disappearance and, instead of asking directly, used it as proof of her accusations." Henry shook his head. "What I wonder is how I didn't realize what she was doing sooner. How I didn't see the signs." "Love blinds us sometimes," Louisa replied softly. "She's your mother. It's natural to trust her. But at what cost?" Henry stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the Washington, D.C. night sparkled with thousands of lights. The cost was almost losing the most important person who entered Peter's life, and mine in recent years. He turned, facing her directly now. There was an intensity in his eyes that made Louisa's heart race. "Today, when I saw you there, facing those absurd accusations with such dignity, when I saw Peter standing up to defend you, even though he was just a child, I realized something I might have known for a long time but was afraid to admit." "What?" Louisa's voice came out almost as a whisper. "That I've fallen in love with you." "Louisa." The words hung in the air between them, finally spoken after months of glances, restrained gestures, denied feelings. Louisa felt her face burn, her heart beating so hard it seemed Henry could hear it. "I know it's inappropriate. I know it complicates everything," Henry continued quickly. You're an employee of the house, I'm your employer. There's Peter to consider. There's my mother, there's society. But after what happened today, I realized I can no longer hide behind social conventions, nor allow my mother to dictate how I should live my life and raise my son. Louisa slowly stood up, her hands trembling. Henry, You don't have to answer now. He took a step towards her. I know it's unfair to put this on you after everything you've been through today. I just needed you to know, to understand why I fought for you, why I will continue to fight. It's not that. She gathered courage to meet his eyes. It's that I also have feelings for you, but I always fought against them. For Peter, for Mary Ann's memory, for my position in this house. When did you realize? Henry asked, now only a step away. The day you defended me. When you confronted your mother for the first time, not for yourself but for justice. Louisa smiled slightly. That's when I saw the man behind the employer, the father Peter deserves. The distance between them narrowed almost imperceptibly. Henry's hands found hers, a gentle, exploratory touch. And now? He asked. Now we have to think about Peter, Louisa replied, though she did not withdraw her hands, and how this will affect everyone. Peter adores you. You already know that, yes, but as a nanny, as a caregiver. It's different. I'm not so sure, Henry smiled. Remember the drawing he made weeks ago? Me, Daddy, and Aunt Louisa. He already sees us as a family, Louisa. The observation made her reflect. It was true that Peter frequently included Louisa in his family drawings, placing her beside his father, holding hands. And what about your mother? Louisa asked, the concern returning. After what happened today, she will never accept this. My mother will have to accept it or distance herself. The firmness in Henry's voice surprised Louisa. Today it became clear that her behavior is toxic, not only to you but to Peter. He saw his grandmother lying, manipulating, attacking someone he loves. What kind of example does that set? Still, she's family. Yes, and she always will be. But that doesn't give her the right to destroy our happiness. Henry gently squeezed Louisa's hands. I know it seems rushed. That there's a lot to consider. But after what we experienced today, I realized we can't postpone life, Louisa. Mary Ann taught me that in the hardest possible way. The mention of Mary Ann brought another thought to Louisa. Don't you feel guilty for feeling something for someone else after her? Henry reflected for a moment. In the beginning, yes. For a long time. But gradually I understood that Mary Ann, more than anyone, would want us to move forward. For Peter to have a complete family again. For me to find someone to love. He smiled sadly. Do you know what she told me in her last days? Don't let Peter grow up only with my photographs and memories. He deserves real hugs, not just memories. The words touched Louisa deeply. She seemed like a wonderful person. She was, and I'm sure she would approve of you. For the way you care for Peter, the way you make him happy. A comfortable silence settled between them, hands still joined, a new understanding blossoming. It was Louisa who finally spoke. We need to take it slow. For Peter. I agree, Henry nodded. No sudden changes. He's been through enough turmoil. And what about your work? You're a public figure from a traditional family. I'm prepared for whatever comes, he replied with conviction. I always put appearances and conventions above real happiness. That ends now. The conversation was interrupted by a hesitant knock on the office door. It was Mrs. Jasmine in her bathrobe, looking concerned. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but the boy is calling. He woke up scared. Let's go, Henry said, reluctantly letting go of Louisa's hands. In the room they found Peter sitting on the bed, silent tears streaming down his face. Seeing them together, his eyes lit up. I had a bad dream, he explained. I dreamed that Aunt Louisa left and never came back. It was just a dream, dear. Louisa sat beside him, hugging him. I'm here. Grandma said very ugly things at the party. Peter continued, his voice trembling. She doesn't like Aunt Louisa, does she? Henry and Louisa exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond. Your grandmother is confused, Peter. Henry finally explained, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes adults get confused and say things that aren't true. Like when she said Aunt Louisa stole the ring, but I was the one who took it. Exactly, Henry nodded. And it was very brave of you to tell the truth, even though it was difficult. I didn't want Aunt Louisa to be sad. Everyone was looking at her strangely. Louisa stroked the boy's hair. "It's all right now, little Peter. Thanks to you, everyone knows the truth. Will Grandma be mad at me?" "No." Henry was firm. "And if she tries, I won't allow it. I promise." Peter looked between his father and the nanny, seeming to notice something different in the way they looked at each other. "You're holding hands," he observed, noticing Henry's fingers intertwined with Louisa's on the bed. The adults exchanged glances, surprised by the child's astute observation. "We are," Henry confirmed, deciding to be honest. "Peter, what would you think if Aunt Louisa and I, if you were dating?" Peter completed, surprising them again. "Well, yes," Henry replied, disarmed by his son's frankness. A smile lit up Peter's face. "I'd really like that. Then Aunt Louisa would never leave, right? She'd live with us forever." The simplicity of the child's logic made both adults smile. For Peter, it was all very simple. Two people he loved together, forming a permanent family. "It's not that simple, dear," Louisa tried to explain. "There are many things to consider." "Like what?" Peter asked, genuinely curious. Henry and Louisa exchanged glances again, not knowing how to explain social complexities, class differences, prejudices, and conventions to an 8-year-old. "Adult things," Henry finally replied. "But the important thing is that we all want what's best for you, Peter, and that we are a family one way or another." "A family," Peter repeated the word, savoring it. "Me, you, and Aunt Louisa. And Grandma, too, when she stops saying things that aren't true." The simplicity of Peter's vision touched them both deeply. For the boy, despite all the confusion and drama, the solution was clear. People who love each other stay together and form a family. "Now you need to sleep." Louisa adjusted the covers around him. "Tomorrow will be another day. Can you stay here until I fall asleep?" Peter asked, holding their hands. "Both of you?" "Of course." Henry sat on the other side of the bed. As Peter fell asleep again, Henry watched Louisa, marveling at her kindness, her strength, her ability to love his son so deeply. At that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that his declaration in the office had not been hasty or emotional. It was the truth his heart had known for a long time. When the boy finally fell into a deep sleep, they silently left the room, leaving the door ajar as Peter liked. In the hallway, Henry took Louisa's hands again. "He understands in his own way. Children usually understand the essential better than adults," she smiled. "For them, love is simply love. And for you?" Henry asked, his gaze intense even in the dim light of the hallway. "For me too," Louisa replied simply. The kiss that followed was soft, hesitant, like a first step on unknown ground. But it contained a promise of patience, of respect, of a future they would build together, no matter the obstacles. "Tomorrow we have a lot to resolve," Henry said after they separated. "My mother will return, and we will need to establish new boundaries, to new rules, together," Louisa completed, for the first time feeling not like an employee but as a partner. That night, the Albright mansion slept in a different silence, not the tense silence of the previous weeks, but a silence of expectation, of possibilities. The birthday party that should have been a social celebration had unexpectedly become a turning point. Masks had fallen, truths were revealed, and in the midst of the chaos, something new and promising had been born. Outside, the city of Washington, D.C. continued its nightly dance of lights, indifferent to the small human drama unfolding within that mansion on Embassy Row. But for the three main inhabitants of that house, a rediscovered father, a courageous woman, and a boy wise beyond his years, the world had fundamentally changed. And despite the uncertainty of tomorrow, one thing was clear: they would face whatever came as a family. Not a family defined by social conventions or blood ties, but one forged by daily choices, by conscious love, by permanence when it would have been easier to leave. The morning after the disastrous birthday, the Albright mansion dawned in silence. Henry had asked Mrs. Eleanor to spend the night out, an unprecedented decision that showed the seriousness of the situation. Louisa cared for Peter, who was still processing the events of the previous day. Near noon, the sound of a car announced the matriarch's arrival. Mrs. Eleanor entered alone, visibly tired, her impeccable clothes now rumpled after a night away from home. "Henry," she greeted formally upon finding him in the hall. Can we talk? In the office, the conversation was initially tense. Henry demanded a sincere apology to Louisa for the false accusations and public humiliations. The matriarch resisted, but faced with her son's firmness and the real possibility of losing her place in the family, she finally relented. "I apologize for my behavior, Louisa." Her voice trembled slightly. "For the unfounded accusations, for everything. It wasn't fair." It wasn't the warmest apology, but Louisa recognized the effort. "I accept your apology, Mrs. Eleanor. I hope we can rebuild our relationship, for Peter's sake." It was at that moment that the matriarch revealed the true driver of her actions. "I'm afraid, Henry, afraid of losing my place in this family, afraid of being alone in old age." The unexpected vulnerability moved Louisa, who for the first time saw the elderly woman beyond the authoritarian figure. "I never intended to take your place. Peter needs his grandmother. Family is not something you replace. It's something that expands." Peter interrupted the conversation, entering excitedly upon seeing his grandmother back. His childish capacity for forgiveness surprised everyone. "You have to apologize to Aunt Louisa. Joe said things that weren't true." "I already did, Peter," Mrs. Eleanor replied, stroking her grandson's hair. "And I promise I won't do it again. Then it's all good," the boy concluded, simplifying complex issues with the logic of childhood. "Can we all have lunch together today?" That lunch was the first of many where a new arrangement began to take shape. In the following weeks, the mansion found a different rhythm. Henry and Louisa built their relationship cautiously, attentive to Peter's reactions, who seemed to flourish with the new dynamic. Mrs. Eleanor, initially rigid, began to observe how her grandson responded positively to Louisa's presence not only as a nanny, but as a maternal figure. It was the matriarch who, surprisingly, took the decisive step to normalize the situation in the eyes of society. 3 months after the incident, she organized a dinner for close friends, introducing Louisa not as the nanny, but as Henry's companion. "Why did you do that?" Louisa asked later. "Because I realized that I either embrace change or I lose my place in this family, and because I saw how happy Peter is, how Henry is alive again." 6 months after the party, Henry surprised Louisa with a marriage proposal in the mansion's garden, with Peter as the sole witness. The ring was simple but elegant, not the old family heirloom that had caused so much confusion, but a new one representing a fresh start. The wedding took place the following spring. To the surprise of many, Mrs. Eleanor actively participated in the preparations, giving her opinion on the buffet, the flowers, the guest list, not to control, but to share her experience. "I never thought this day would come," she confessed to Louisa on the morning of the ceremony, helping her with her dress. "That I would be happy about it." The ceremony brought together distinct worlds: Henry's high society friends, Louisa's simple family, the mansion staff as honored guests. Peter, proud as a ring-bearer, carried the rings with solemn responsibility. At the moment of the speeches, Mrs. Eleanor surprised everyone by asking for the microphone. "When my son lost his wife, I thought our family would never recover. I took control, trying to protect everyone from suffering, but I almost prevented a new light from entering our lives." The matriarch turned to the bride. "It took me a long time to understand that family is not just blood. It's who we choose every day. It's who stays in difficult times." A year after the wedding, during a Sunday lunch, Louisa made an announcement that completed that family's healing cycle. "Peter, we have news. In a few months, you'll have a baby brother or sister." The boy exploded with joy. "I knew it. I asked in my prayers every night." The house that had once been governed by control and appearances was now reorganizing itself around genuine affection. The crystal glass broken years before, the catalyst for that transformation, had become just a family anecdote. The journey that began with shards on the floor had revealed the fragility of social masks, unmasked power games, and redefined the meaning of place within that house. Louisa's promise to Peter, that she would not abandon him, had been fulfilled not only for the boy, but for that entire family who, against social expectations, chose each other every day. The truth, everyone realized, was worth more than crystal, status, or appearances. And in the process of discovering this, they found something no money could buy: the peace of a home where everyone knew their true worth. The end of the story. Dear listeners, we hope Louisa, Henry, and Peter's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally engaging narratives about families built beyond blood. Find this exclusive content by clicking on the left. If this story stirred emotions in you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and give that special like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships. Share your own experiences about emotional bonds that transcend social conventions in the comments. After all, as we learn from the Albright family, everyone's true place is where authentic love flourishes.